Football made simple. Become great at your craft by finding ways to make it simple for those around you. This is the Coaching 101 podcast hosted by Find a Way Productions with your co-host, Daniel Chamberlain and Kenny Simpson. What's up, coaches? This is the Coaching 101 podcast. I'm Daniel Chamberlain here with Kenny Simpson. Coach, how's Northeast Arkansas this week?
Man, it's going better. It's definitely football season. I can tell because it's just you're constantly tired, and you never feel like you can catch up. And so that means football season's full swing. And it's kind of that middle of the year where early on everybody's excited, everybody's doing well. If your team is still doing well, you feel really good. And then there are some guys that I know have already been messaging me about wanting to switch offenses next year because unfortunately. Sometimes the writing is on the wall pretty quickly as a coach, but whatever it is, it's that mid-season kind of grind where, a lot of teams are just now kind of finding their footing. But really the games that matter are either happening right now or they're about to happen. And so for me, I'm just constantly trying to kind of keep my head above water. I think that's kind of the deal is we need to think far enough ahead so that we're still planning for the future. And I learned that as a young coach, you can't wear them out for 1 week, but you also need to make sure you're looking almost one day at a time because it seems to change from injuries to discipline issues to, just depth chart issues. It seems like you may go from Monday to Friday and as a head coach, you're dealing with 25 different things. Anyway, so you got a ton of things going on. I know, as a head coach, it seems like you're just constantly dealing with what's around the corner. And it's almost impossible to prepare for those things, so, whether it's, and right now we're dealing with some injuries and we're dealing with, you may have weather issues where we don't have an indoor. So where do we go if it's raining or it's, there's just so many things going on as a head coach that I think around this time of the year, the exhaustion starts to set in. Because the adrenaline doesn't really kick in for me until you get into those last 3 or 4 games where you're really making that playoff push. Right. And a lot of times your adrenaline will just kind of push you through the year.
Yeah. It's definitely that midpoint of the season we've all just about played 4 games. So some have probably played 5. I don't know anybody that keeps a bye week this late, though. Kind of district play just started for us. Is that where y'all are at, too? You've got 1 game of district play in?
Right. Yeah, we've played 4.
Yeah. So, it's been a good season. The freshman league, we're just about done. Just about hit that halfway point there as well. It really is that part where you've had to install something every week to try to get your system in, but you don't. Now it's like, okay, do I keep mixing it up? Am I done making installs? You just kind of have to. And now it's just problem solving. So it's a really fun part of the season. I enjoy it a lot. So I'm sure you guys are too. 4-0 over there.
Yeah, when you're 4-0, the season's going well. And of course we're not naive. We have some very big challenges in front of us, but 4-0 is always fun. I've been 4-0 now. This is the second time in my career. We've not had a lot of chances to go 4-0. We usually kind of front load our schedule, some tough ones. This year we're doing well, but I would put a little word out of caution for the guys that are maybe on the other end. Because on the other end of that spectrum, 0-4 or maybe 1-3, whatever it might be, don't just throw this season out. Like there's times where you're not very good, and the players probably know you're not very good, and maybe everything that could go wrong has gone wrong. And so a lot of times as coaches, I call it the reset generation. Like if you're playing Madden, you'd have already hit reset. I conceded, reset, start over. But a lot of times in those seasons, those are opportunities for you as a coach to do some things that maybe you wouldn't do before. That's where I came up with the gun tee, was in the middle of 2 of those rough seasons because what we were doing was not working. Right. So we got to try this and we got to try that. We got to try this. You don't want to just keep putting in brand new stuff. I'm not suggesting you do that, but it is an opportunity for you to kind of think outside the box in those situations and maybe come up with something that, maybe it can help you win this year. Obviously, you don't want to quit on the year, but that you can build off of for the next year.
I think everyone is probably, I think early in the season, you have to know what your ceiling is. I mean, in the summer, you're probably kind of identifying what is your ceiling. And then it's hard to evaluate how good your group is on those first 3 games, um, because you're still learning how to compete. You don't, I mean, yeah, we schedule games, usually 2 to 4 years out, I would say, right? You need the next set, the next rotation of non-district, and you don't know how good those guys are going to be next year, right? There's coaches I work with that at other schools that they have teams on the schedule that were world beaters a year ago, and this year they're not that good. Last year were everybody's doormat, and this year they're going to be 500 plus teams. So you don't really know what those first 3 games are going to really hold anyway. So it's hard for me to mentally go into a game not knowing how is this supposed to play out, right? And I guess we always think, oh, I'm supposed to go in here and win this game, but you got to be honest with yourself too, right? If you're going against the defending state champ in your non-district, yeah, you need to put a game plan together to beat them, but you can't be surprised if they come out and put a whooping on you, right? So it's
Yeah, and you play non-conference for different reasons. Like you said, those games are they're fun and ultimately they do matter. I think a lot of coaches, those matter more for you if maybe you're in a new situation, you're a new coach, or you're not used to winning as a program. Those non-conference games mean a lot. For me, all they are is evaluation. We're just trying to evaluate what we have and what we don't have and who could do what for us. And then you get into conference play, where we're only one game in. And those games you're in the playoffs now, and you have to win these games to set yourself up. So there's no reason to hold anything back at this point.
Yep. Well, we came here tonight to talk about defending the RPO. I know it's something that has really taken the world by storm, and I'd say the last 3 to 5 years, maybe. Some people are doing it longer than that, but it really became. I think it's in everyone's playbook now, right? Everyone on offense has got an RPO of some kind, whether it's a base one, just one, and they're going to use it off of different plays, or they got a whole bunch. So we're jumped on here tonight to talk about defending those RPOs. Before we get going, Coach, why don't you tell us some ways that we can simplify football for our staff and for our players?
Coaching 101 podcast is sponsored by Findaway Productions. Findaway Productions also sponsors fbcoachsimpson.com for all your coaching needs, with over 30 coaching materials, books, as well as 50 PowerPoints and videos and smaller materials, and the free magazine headsets. Findaway Productions also sponsors offensivecoordinatoracademy.com, all things offense, and defensivecoordinatoracademy.com, all things defense.
This episode is brought to you by Athletic Speed and Movement. At athleticspeedmovement.com, we've taken Del Basquet's 45 years of speed and movement training and put it all in one place just for you. You can get the same training that NFL players have been getting for years, collegiate players have been getting for years, and now high schools across the nation are paying thousands of dollars to bring Dell in to install his system, but we've got it online for you. It's time to help your team become faster, not just in the 40, not just their sprint speed, but between the tackles and their cuts while they're chasing down the quarterback. It's time for you to help them become faster everywhere. Jump over to athleticspeedmovement.com. There's an orange button there. Just click it. It says, get the keys to playing faster. You'll get the 3 core movement video from Dell. He's explaining the science behind it, all for just the price of your email. Check it out, athleticspeedmovement.com. Awesome. Thanks for those, Coach. So let's jump right into questions here. Number 1 is, what is the RPO game? So what is an RPO?
Well, and RPOs can kind of be identified in several ways. And we kind of talked about this in a previous episode, so I won't just hammer this, but there are really several versions of RPOs. So we'll kind of start with the old one that's been around probably the longest. That's when people weren't quite as creative, but it's been around even in the West Coast offense. Even under center, you can run these. And that's where you have receivers doing one thing and a run called in the box. So that can look like a lot of different things. It can look like inside zone with a bubble screen, or that could look like just one receiver running one route and you're running a run play. Generally, those plays are predetermined before the snap. Either the quarterback has the authority to look out there and either take advantage of numbers or leverage or a matchup, or a coach might, more realistic at the high school level, a coach might be telling him or signaling to him, we call that the gift. Take the gift. They're gonna play off. We're gonna go ahead and just throw that thing out there and make them tackle an athlete into space. So that's the first kind of level of RPO. And then you have what a real RPO is, in my opinion, which is when you are reading a defender after the snap has happened. And so those can be, I categorize them as run options, or RROs, or run pass options, which is the more popular one, run RPO. So a run option has been around for a while. Quarterback is running something, and he's either reading the edge defender on the backside, or he might be reading a backside linebacker or whatever, but he's reading somebody with the ability to pull it and run if that somebody overcommits. And you see this is evolving constantly with the new bash game, where we're blocking GT and running jet sweep and reading the outside defender. And you see the Buffalo Bills are even running this with Josh Allen. So it's worked all the way up, to the NFL level. It started out at the high school and the college level. Rich Rodriguez started out by the first one to read backside of outside zone in the shotgun. And so it's kind of grown from there. So those are what I'd call run options. Then you have run pass options. And those are where we're going to read a defender after the snap, where if this defender who's a run fitter, so that could be a safety who's coming down in the box making a tackle. That could be a backside linebacker who's coming in and fitting and making the tackle. It could be a play side linebacker. But these are guys that essentially their job is to fit the run. So when you're running the ball, these guys are becoming problems in that, where they're going to come make tackles. All right. So don't think like you're running an RPO off a corner. That's not very often. That's more of just a read, like a gift.
Right.
If you're running a real RPO, you're probably running off a guy who's fitting inside and who's making plays. And if that guy does whatever you think he needs to do, usually if he commits to the run, we're going to run some receiver into that voided area. So generally RPOs are run against zone. It's a zone beater. If you're going to commit the guy who's supposed to cover that zone and he's going to attack the run, we're going to throw the ball into the zone that he left. Okay, it's kind of like play action, but on steroids, because you could hand it off. And so that's the second point I've got. The third one I've got on here, you're starting to see where we're starting to get double reads. So you watch Miami Dolphins. I'm a Dolphin fan, and they hung 70 points today. And so if you're watching them play, Tua is probably really fun to watch if you like the RPO game, because basically every play, it feels as though he has the ability to hand it off or pull it. And then sometimes you get confused if it's play action or RPO, because he's so good at pulling it and then reading multiple defenders, which is new. That's kind of the new movement in the RPO game. It's been around forever where you would read both sides of the field. You have a gift and you have an RPO on the other side. Now you're starting to see people reading the RPO and they're running like a stick concept, where you have an out and a curl. So he's reading a box defender for the run. If that guy moves, he's pulling it. Then he's reading an outside linebacker for the pass, and he has two options on it. It's kind of the next evolution of the RPO game, because they've got to evolve, because defenses are starting to have, that's what we're talking about tonight, defenses are starting to come up with different answers on how to try to stop this and how to bluff that and get here and do whatever. Unfortunately, offenses they're anticipating that. The problem with that becomes Tua is 1 in a million quarterback, and not very
Right.
many guys can pull it and read it and get it out like that. So defensively, you just have to hope you're not going against him. Tonight we're going to talk about ways to stop the RPO. Sometimes you get a guy like him, man, I would just say run it. You just run the ball, and we're not going to let you throw it, because that's what you want to do. But I think that's kind of the evolution of the RPO in a nutshell. But it's not going anywhere. It's just going to continue to get more elaborate.
Yeah, they talk about football being cyclical. So we were triple option, and then everybody wants to spread it out, and now we're like, well, how can we fit the triple option back into football, right? So I feel like that's all we're doing now, running zone and hitting, an out behind it, but letting our quarterback pull and have a chance at running it, so that really your CBR cutback boot reverse player, right? He's the new player in conflict, and he's like, do I cover this receiver that's in my zone, or come play cutback or reverse or whatever it is? So it's just constant, and I love it. It's just constant cat and mouse game. That's something else I was going to say about RPOs, but here we
Well,
are.
I was going to say we played a team this week. We scored 59 points, and as a smart coach and as a good defense. But I've got a kid at quarterback that he could really hurt you on the RPO game. So we almost forced them. We got in a lot of unbalanced sets where he felt he had to play too high because he was so worried about the RPO game. We ran the ball for 400 yards because I was just going to take what they gave me, which is a light box, run the ball. Well, the second half, we go in at halftime. I said, he's going to make adjustments. Good coach. He did. He committed another guy into the box. Well, guess we heard him in the second half, backside RPO. And so it's just one of those deals where as a defense, it's tough.
Yeah. I think we talked about the gift and how now you've got multiple RPOs on the field all the time. Brent Dearmon's the guy that I've been studying his stuff a ton about just learning RPOs. What he's doing, he's at North Alabama now as the head coach, and he's the one that kind of introduced me to that. Not only does he have 2 or 3 RPOs on the field at any time, and then that multi-level one. So now it's a zone read. I can pull it and throw the out, or I can turn and run with it and let my H-back clear, and it's just, it goes on and on and on, right? So now he's got 3, 4, 5 plays every time the ball snapped. It's like he's going to make you wrong. So it's pretty neat to kind of see where people are going with it, how we're advancing it, evolving it, like you said. So how are opponents trying to use these RPOs against me, Coach?
Well, generally, we kind of both have mentioned the word here, but we'll go ahead and throw it out there. The word a conflict defender is what they're looking for. So you got to think in your defensive structure, whether you're a 3-4 or a 4-3 or whatever you're in, you're going to have some defenders whose job is to defend the run and the pass. And so those are generally your conflict defenders. Although a good RPO team can also do it to your defensive linemen. They can read them. And so you got to figure out who are your guys that are going to be in conflict the most and start in the spring. So if you're doing it now, week 6, you're probably behind the 8 ball here, but in the spring of having different looks, letting them learn how to bluff. That was never a thing at the high school level till really about 3 years ago, where you had to like bluff something with that guy and then do something different. Because the spread offense is starting to kind of take over, especially if you're playing at the higher levels. You're playing the higher levels of high school where everyone runs spread and no one runs wing tee. So those guys, you have to have multiple looks to take away the pre-snap reads or to take advantage of the pre-snap reads. But to do that, you have to identify who are your conflict guys. So 3-4, typically, that's going to be both outside linebackers and both safeties. So those are your conflict players that most offenses are going to try to attack. So you got to think about, okay, what are some ways I can give one look with this guy and another look the next play and not confuse my kid? That's tough. The second thing you got to think about when they're trying to figure out of coming after you is who is your bonus player? I call it like a box player. So usually if you're some kind of too high shell, which almost everyone's gone to against the spread, that's one of those safeties. One of them, when he sees run action, he's coming, okay? Or it could be a backside inside linebacker. If he sees outside zone or buck or whatever, is he fitting or is he slow playing it? Because if he's flying, he becomes now a potential guy that they might read too. So you have these kind of box fitters that are coming from different angles, and understanding how the offense is looking at them will help you as a defensive coach understand how you can maybe give them a false look. And so that's kind of big. The last one I put on there is a lot of times we just played a game this past weekend. Again, I have a lot of respect for this coach. I know he scored a bunch of points, but I thought his game plan was solid. Sometimes you just have dudes when you coach football long enough, you just kind of know sometimes your guys played well, but he was reading our best defensive lineman wherever we put him. So like they would see where we moved him. This kid's going to go play collegiate football. And then that's where he'd set his RPO.
Right.
So a lot of times they'll do it to your best player. So a player that they know they can't block, that's a guy that's going to have a big circle around him when they're game planning. How are we going to handle this kid? Well, let's read him. And so that becomes kind of the new way RPO guys are starting to think, same way the old school option guys did. If you can't block them, read them. And that's kind of the idea in the RPO world.
I was gonna say, you say it's the new school way, but yeah, zone read has been doing that for years. I mean, well, not only zone read, right? Power read's been there for a long time. So,
But think about, before you move too far here, but think about like now, it was always zone read, it was always backside DN, always. Well, now you're running like zone read lock, where we're going to lock onto the backside in and turn the one technique loose and read him.
yeah.
So offenses can move it with one word and read a different defender.
So what can we do to stop that? So I know you've talked about all the places they can read, and you're the pro there. So I don't have a lot of input on what are they trying to do. So what can we do to stop RPOs of all the levels? I mean, that the force fitters are hard enough, right? And now you're talking about taking away a box player, a D lineman, a safety.
Right. I think you have to think who their best player is. So, like in my mind, who do I want to have the ball? Like, and sometimes it stinks because they're all good, and that's really tough. But when you're breaking down a team, you have to look at who's their worst player and what does he do worst. And generally, that's giving the ball to a guy running sideways. That's usually what teams do worst. What they want to do to hurt you is run vertical. And so that's usually the first thing. That's not always the case. They might have a D1 running back and you don't want him. You want to make sure that he pulls it. So you need to scout that out. Who do we want to have the ball and who do we definitely want not to have the ball? And so we need to figure that part out first. If that's a slot receiver, that he's a Division I kid, so we're going to slow play and dare you to hand zone off all night long, and we're not going to let this kid beat us. Or if it's a quarterback who's a Division I athlete but not a great thrower, okay, we're going to make sure we're slow playing on the backside so that we make him hand it off. Okay, or if the running back's the dude and we want anyone else to beat us, then we're just going to fly to go take that away. But generally, not all the time, but generally teams that are running RPOs, if you watch them carefully, their best athlete is not the running back. And that's not always the truth. But generally, teams that are running RPOs, their best athlete is not the running back, because to me, I wouldn't call an RPO if I want him to hand it off to the running back. And so you got to kind of think through that part. So the first thing you got to do is identify who do we want to beat us, how do we want them to beat us. If they can't run the ball and you're better with them in the box, play the RPO. So that's just kind of the ways we've done that before. You'll also get a tell on quarterbacks. Like if it's a questionable, is he pulling it and throwing it, or is he giving it? And when he's reading it, is he truly reading it? And if it's a questionable, what is he doing? And then when you kind of know that, you can dictate more what he's going to do. So and it's not, you can't really just stop it, but if I know if I get this guy to hesitate half a second, he's going to hand it off, well, then that's what we're going to do. And then as soon as I hesitate, bam, I'm going. You can do some things in that world. The second thing you got to do is you've got to move guys around. You've got to bluff and show things pre-snap. You got to at least take that part out of the game. Like you can't let a guy look out there and go, oh, I got 2-on-1. I'm going to throw a bubble screen. Okay. Or my Division I kid has man-to-man coverage right here. We're going to throw that ball out there. We're going to have to do some stuff pre-snap to take things away. So you need words that talk to your outside backers, your force players, your whatever, that get them to stem and move more so than any time. Even if you're just running the same coverage every play, something that tells them stem to take this away. Like the most basic RPO is looking out there one-on-one and throwing like a choice route. So in your playbook, do you have the ability to show off coverage and then jump it with a roll coverage and maybe get a pick? Or can you show jammed coverage and bail? Or can you show one-on-one and drop a guy underneath it for the slant? So do you have that in your defense where you can show one thing and get to something else? And if you don't, you better get it. Because if we know what you're sitting in, eventually we're going to be able to take advantage of that, unless your guy's just way better than my guy. Right. And that's just on the single receiver side. Then you got to go, okay, what about trips? How are we going to take that away? What are we going to show? So this doesn't have to be some exotic spin forever, but you need to be able to show something that's going to take away their pre-snap read and then get into what you want to get into. So that's a lot of that is bluffing. You know, a lot of times you might walk up like you're going to blitz, hope he pulls it and drop into that hook curl zone and hope you get a cheap one. So I think one of the biggest ways to beat the RPO game is get him to turn it over once or twice. That's going to slow it down a whole lot. You know, so that's a big one. The next one you could do is probably the more common one that most people are going with. I don't really recommend this one, but if you're just getting killed by the RPO, is going man to man. Lock up the receivers, go man zero, and say, you're not going to throw an RPO on us. You know, if you really want to be, safe, you could go man free and have one guy back there to help you out. But then they're going to run the ball every game because they have the numbers. But if you go man zero and just have that mix up in there, you can take away the RPO world. Again, I'm not suggesting you live in that world, but if you play an RPO team that you don't think can beat you one-on-one, why not? You know, make them throw, because most spread teams, when they see man zero, are going to revert to deep shots. They're going to revert to taking deep shots on your kid. If you've shown man zero and they've shown they don't have an answer for it, man, give it some more. You know, the reason I say don't do it too much is because people like me, we have a man zero game plan we usually will revert to take advantage of that. But if you're getting killed in the RPO world, that is a potential solution. Would be essentially locking them up and saying, you're going to throw it on us, but you're not going to be able to just pick and choose these giant holes in a zone. We're at least going to play man.
I really like what you said about disguising the coverage, and I think that works in many, many ways. One, just showing a different coverage you plan on running. Start somewhere and end up somewhere else, right? But also just making that read kind of cloudy. You have to remember that it's not the coach is calling the plays. He's the one that can see what's supposed to hit, but he's not the one making the read and chunking the ball or handing it off. So if I can make it cloudy for that quarterback for half a second, I don't know what they're showing me, or he thinks it's wide open and he's sending a ball in there and we had it covered the whole time, right? So you got to outsmart one kid. You don't have to outsmart the coach on every single play. I guess over the game, you better keep the coach outsmarted, but we can make him make a couple bad reads. That was just a very small amount of time to react. And you mentioned, what is he being coached to do in questionable situations? Is he being coached to, like, I want to throw the ball here? Or is it going to be handoff all night long? And we can kind of live with either one of those as long as we know what we're going to create with our defense, right? In the fit and out of the fit is something I learned by Dominic Franks. He kind of told me how they've been playing RPOs for a while now. And that's just understanding that if your front side, I guess the last couple of years, this year it may be getting a little different, but if you're front side, so you're away from the running back, it's harder to read front side on an RPO, right? Because all those guys better be blocking. And so those cats on defense know they can come be in the fit. And then on the back side, if you're away from the runner or on the same side as the running back, it's most likely that they're going to be trying to RPO you, so you can play very patient, very flat-footed, come late and just show I'm here, I'm going to stay here, and make them hand the ball off. And then just being very patient, like you said earlier, Coach. I think another thing you need to game plan is, what concept are they trying to RPO you with? Is it just a slant? Is it stick concept? Where, I mean, that's two passes that, you in your head, you're like, well, an out is very easy to throw. Go try it. Go try to throw an out, right? Like, it's a long throw, and it's to a moving target by a guy that's probably a moving target. His feet aren't set perfectly. He's probably, trying to ride a running back into the hole before he's going to pull it. And then the curl, that's a very late developing route, right? He's got to be able to, what is it, 15 back to 12 or whatever. It takes a long time to get down there. And maybe they run it to 12 back to 10, whatever, but it's still a long route. And so is that a super efficient concept for them? Because if it's not, if they're not very good at it, I might just show that I'm coming for the run, and then, like you said, kind of cover your rear and have somebody there to take those routes or pick one of those balls. And you just have to always go back to what I learned in the 8th grade is there's 3 things that can happen on every pass play, and 2 of them are bad for the offense. So, them winging it out there a whole bunch of times. Coach, I understand that your guys are probably very well coached and a very high percentage of those passes are going to land home, but not always, right? There's going to be drops. There's going to be bad throws. There's going to be hurries and pressures, and the lights are in their eyes and whatever else. You mix that with bad reads. Now you've got some footballs that are flying around that you can take advantage of if you just want to take the runaway.
But it all goes back to that first point we made. Like, what are they good at? Like, again, high school football has evolved. But if you're at a small school or if you're at a school where it's cold in the winter, I mean, there's lots of factors. Don't think just because, oh man, they run RPOs, we better focus all our time on RPOs. Well, just because they run it doesn't mean they're good at throwing it. Like, take away what they do best. If I was playing the Dolphins, you guys, I'm on my Miami Dolphins here. Sorry. If I'm playing the Dolphins, Tyreek Hill is not beating me. Like, you can run the ball for 400 yards if you want to. Like, you saw Bill Belichick play the Dolphins. I know they won, but he sat there in a 3-1 box and we won by 7 because he forced us to do what we probably don't want to do, which is hand it off and not get the ball to Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. And so defensively, sometimes you get beat, but it doesn't mean you had a bad game plan. Like, you made them play, we call it play left-handed. Like, make them play left-handed. And like you mentioned, Daniel, if they're not great at throwing and catching it, okay, throw all the RPOs you want because we're going to stop the run.
Yeah.
But if they're really good at throwing and catching it, most of those teams generally aren't great. If they're usually not great at both. If they are, you're kind of screwed either way. But if they're good at throwing and catching it, they're usually not going to be as physical in the run game, so you can kind of commit less guys. But again, I'd take it back to that first part. Offense has the advantage. That's the way football is now. Make them play left-handed and take away what they do. And then we mentioned it before, you mentioned it again, mixing up your coverages. Do not give them a static look every single play. You got to give them something different.
Yeah. Awesome, Coach. Well, I think we've knocked RPOs out of the park here. I'm sure there's tons more to talk about, and they get way more in depth. But for an in-season podcast episode, that's a pretty good one. If you guys want super in depth, wait until the off season when we're both a little more free. So we'll knock out our last part here, Coach, and that's what not to do as a coach. And I'll let you take that away.
Sure. So what not to do as a coach, again, is one of my favorite parts of the podcast, and most of the stuff is stuff that I've done. But as a defensive coordinator specifically, what not to do as a coach is try to stop everything. Sometimes as a defensive coordinator, we call it chasing squirrels or, chasing ghosts, where you are trying to stop every single thing an offense does. And you're sitting there going, my goodness, they run this and they run this and they run that and they run this. And then worse than that, sometimes you go, well, what if that's a bad game to play as a DC right there. Well, what if they do this? It's okay to think about that and maybe have a plan for you. But if I'm a defensive coordinator and I'm a head coach now, so I get to visit with ours a lot, I just tell them the same thing. Stop what they do best 90% of the time. Stop that. Okay. Stop their best 2 or 3 players, like put guys on those guys and make them beat you left-handed. Like we've been mentioning this whole podcast, make them do something that they're not comfortable doing, right. But don't spend a ton of time. So in the RPO world, don't spend a ton of time on one RPO they ran one time in 9 games and you're running 5 different mixed coverages because you're worried about that. Okay. Stop the run, or stop whatever they do best and then worry about the next thing. But I'd be careful as a defensive coordinator of putting too much stuff in. Having too much stuff in and being not good at any of it. Because if I can just line up against you, we run RPOs, but if you're going to allow me to line up against you and run our base run plays for 8 yards a carry, you're probably not going to win because we're just going to keep running that over and over and over again. I would make me have to pull it and throw it and have to do different things that I don't want to do. Or if you're playing a coach who wants to throw it, do the opposite. Yeah. But don't worry about stopping everything. Try to stop what they do best and make them do other stuff.
Absolutely. Well, we'll get out of here, Coach. Social media wise, I am at Coach Chambo OK on Twitter/X. I guess you can look at my Facebook if you want to. You're probably watching it live right now if you care about Facebook at all. And I'm Daniel Chamberlain on there. You can email me at chamberlainfootballconsulting@gmail.com. Where can we find you, Coach?
Anything FB Coach Simpson. So, of course, the website's fbcoachsimpson.com. At FB Coach Simpson is my Twitter handle. And then fbcoachsimpson@gmail.com is my email address.
Awesome. The podcast is at Coaching 101 Pod on the Twitter or X, whichever we're calling it these days. We want to thank you for being a listener of the Coaching 101 podcast. I forgot how to read for a minute. We hope you join us next week as we continue to make the complex more simple. Please consider subscribing to the show so you always know when the new episodes are coming out. We'll leave you with this. It's hard to beat someone who never gives up. No matter the situation, find a way.